Hey guys, tonight we wake up somewhere unfamiliar. You're groggy, your neck hurts, and the smell, oh, the smell, is like someone boiled wet wool in a garlic stew. You blink. The ceiling is made of rough-hewn beams. Dust filters down with every creak. And beside you is a sleeping man whose last bath was likely a historical event in itself. Welcome to the year 1347. You're in a modest medieval town, and unfortunately, you're the newest resident. There is no phone buzzing, no gentle morning playlist, no thermostat. Just chickens. Loud, relentless chickens. The floor is dirt, the walls are sweating, and the straw mattress beneath you is lumpy in ways science can't explain. Someone outside is shouting about turnips, and just so we're clear, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you all listen from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit up slowly. The garments waiting for you are brown, itchy, and look like they were tailored by someone holding a grudge. The only footwear is a pair of wooden clogs that scream scoliosis. Someone hands you a mug of something steaming. It smells like broth, but tastes like betrayal. Congratulations, it's beer for breakfast. Everyone drinks it, even kids, because the water is more suspicious than the guy selling miracle cures out of a sack. The year 1347 is complicated. It's a bad time for banking, personal hygiene, and frankly, being alive. The Black Death is on the horizon, and you're smack in the middle of the feudal era, where social mobility is as rare as clean fingernails. Historians still argue whether the average peasant really lived in squalor, but your current bed-to-wall ratio doesn't inspire confidence. As you step outside, a rooster screams at you. The village smells like dung and damp hay. People are already bustling, milling flour, tending goats, arguing over cabbage rights. A man nearby sneezes, crosses himself, and mutters something about bad spirits in the wind. You instinctively reach for your phone to Google it, and then remember, your only tech is fire. And it's not even yours. Language is another hurdle. You recognize words, but the accent is thick, Old Englishish, mumbly, and full of terms like yay and mayhap. Good luck ordering a sandwich. Speaking of which, meals are dictated by the church calendar, your social class, and whether your landlord felt generous that day. Spoiler, he didn't. As you try to make sense of your surroundings, a barefoot child hands you a dead rat. Smiling. Apparently, it's a gift. You thank him in your best medieval pantomime, which somehow leads to him calling you soft as goat cheese. You'll remember that one later. The town itself is cozy in a claustrophobic way. Houses are made from wattle and daub, basically sticks and mud glued together by optimism. Streets are narrow, often unpaved, and teeming with dogs, geese, and humans doing highly personal things in public. There are no clocks. Time is told by bells or the sun, or by the old man who shouts noon when he feels it in his bones. You already missed the snooze button. You walk past the marketplace, stalls selling limp vegetables, questionable cuts of meat, and soap that smells like boiled tragedy. A woman is loudly haggling over turnip prices while another sells charms to ward off bad air. Historians still debate whether the medieval belief in miasma, bad smells causing disease, was entirely unfounded or just hilariously misapplied. Either way, nobody's wearing deodorant. Just then, a donkey sneezes on you. Welcome to the past. You're hungry. Which is unfortunate because food in the Middle Ages isn't so much farm to table as it is whatever didn't rot yet. You shuffle toward the small wooden table inside your cottage, shared with 3 other adults, a toddler, and possibly a weasel, and find your breakfast waiting, a bowl of grayish mush that could generously be called gruel. It's warm, that's something. You take a bite and are immediately greeted by the dull taste of wet cardboard mixed with oat dust and sadness. It's made of boiled grains, barley or rye maybe, and it's got the consistency of regret. Someone kindly explains that today's batch is especially fine because it was stirred with a clean stick. You're not sure what the alternative was, and you're afraid to ask. There's no coffee. Let that sink in. No caffeine. No morning jolt. Just more ale. Or small beer, as they call it. A weak, low-alcohol brew that everyone drinks because it's safer than water. Except it isn't particularly safe. It just feels safe when you've got no other options and you've already accepted that your dinner might contain a feather or two. Your fellow villagers eat in silence, occasionally pausing to belch or bless things. The bread, which you hoped would be a highlight, is rock hard and full of surprise seeds, which is a charming way of saying pebbles. Dental work is about to become relevant. Speaking of which, nobody has teeth the way you know teeth. You glance around and see gums. So many gums. Historians still argue whether medieval diets were inherently healthier than today's processed fare, but the lack of dental hygiene has certainly leveled the playing field. You're chewing very, very carefully now. A fly lands in your bowl. Everyone else shrugs. But hey, not all medieval food is terrible. In some places and seasons, you might get eggs, dried peas, cabbage, or even salted fish. That is, if you're lucky, have connections, and it's not a fasting day. The medieval calendar is littered with religious fasts. Some people spent up to a third of the year technically not eating meat. Of course, rich folks found loopholes. A favorite trick? Classifying beaver tail as fish so it could be eaten on Fridays. Because apparently, if it lives in water, it counts. You will not be dining with the rich. You finish your breakfast, such as it was, and your stomach is only slightly less sad. Someone hands you a crust of bread for lunch later. You're told to tuck it into your tunic for safekeeping. This makes you feel medieval in a quaint, romantic sort of way, until you realize the tunic has no pockets, and now the bread is rubbing against your ribs like a stale sponge. You notice one woman has brought her own seasoning pouch. Salt, thyme, a hint of dried onion. She is clearly a culinary genius. You want to be her friend. You attempt small talk, but she only scowls and mutters something about moon spirits. It's unclear whether she's rejecting you or just warning you about the weather. Either way, she walks off with the good herbs. You decide to venture to the village bakehouse. Everyone shares one oven because fire is expensive and you need permission to even use it. Communal baking means your dough might mingle with your neighbors, and if your loaf burns, everyone will know and judge. Some towns even had official bread inspectors to make sure you weren't cheating on flour weight. Historians still argue whether this was an early form of consumer protection or just a highly specific vendetta against crumb fraud. You peer inside the bakehouse. It's hot, smoky, and full of shouting. A man's loaf just burst open, which apparently means bad luck. Another woman is whispering to her dough for luck. You try to be helpful and offer to carry some firewood, only to immediately drop it and roll your ankle on a chicken. No one helps. The chicken seems smug. Eventually, you hobble home, gripping your crust bread like a fragile relic. Your stomach gurgles ominously. You lie down for a moment, wondering how much worse lunch could be than breakfast. Spoiler, it involves fermented turnips. You've survived breakfast, barely, and now your mouth feels like it's been sanded with oat husks. Naturally, you want to brush your teeth, except that's not a thing. There's no minty gel, no bristles, no timed buzzes. You ask around for something resembling a toothbrush and are handed a splintery twig with one end frayed like a sad broom. You're told it's a chewing stick, and it's apparently the height of dental sophistication, used in some form across medieval Europe, the Islamic world, and even parts of Africa. You begin to gnaw awkwardly at the twig, scraping at your molars while staring blankly into the misty morning. The taste is vaguely peppery, and while it does something, you're fairly certain it's not ADA approved. No toothpaste either. The closest thing would be a homemade blend of charcoal, crushed bones, or ash, sometimes with a dash of mint or sage if you're lucky and have an herb garden, which you do not. Historians still argue whether medieval oral care was surprisingly effective or basically cosmetic. Either way, nobody's breath is fresh, and the concept of floss is still a few centuries and a lot of dental trauma away. Your teeth ache. But worse than the dull throb is the realization that there is no dentist. If you chip a molar, or heaven forbid, get a cavity, it's you, a neighbor with pliers and a strong prayer. Toothaches were treated with poultices, prayers, or in some extreme cases, literally burning the nerves with hot irons. Suddenly, the chewing stick doesn't seem so bad. You pass a group of children tossing sheep knuckle bones like dice. One of them is holding a string with what appears to be a tooth tied to it. Is it a game? A trophy? You don't ask. Some questions are best left unanswered. Later in the day, you meet the village barber surgeon, who is, to be clear, not licensed in anything. He cuts hair, drains blood, and will happily yank your tooth while discussing the weather. His tools are rusted, his apron is suspiciously red-stained, and his breath smells like onion beer. You decline his services. Dental hygiene aside, bathing is also not what you'd call routine. You're told some people bathe once a week, others once a month. In colder climates, it's once when they're born and again when they die. You're offered a bucket and a rag and pointed toward a creek with strong current and stronger smells. Soap exists, technically, but it's harsh and smells like old bacon. It's made from animal fat and lye, and using it feels like exfoliating with regret. Many people simply scrub with sand, herbs, or nothing. You try to clean your face with a damp cloth and end up dirtier. Your body misses shampoo. You walk past a woman brushing her hair with a carved wooden comb. Her braids are neat, her eyes wary. Head lice are a fact of life, and hats are more about containment than fashion. You scratch your scalp just thinking about it. Too late. Someone nearby mentions a tooth worm as the cause of dental pain. The belief is widespread that a literal worm burrows into your tooth and lives there, causing agony until it's driven out by smoke or spells. Historians still debate how this idea persisted for so long, but in fairness, it's only slightly less gross than the real causes. You sigh and realize your standards are already dropping. A week ago, you rinsed twice daily. Now, you're proud to still have all your teeth, and mildly concerned that this is the bar. As the sun begins to rise higher, the village slowly empties. People are heading to their daily labor, farming, tanning hides, making shoes, yelling at oxen. You're still working a splinter out of your gum from the chewing stick. Welcome to oral care, 14th century style. Nature calls. Unfortunately, nature does not provide a porcelain throne or triple-ply toilet paper. You ask where the bathroom is, and the reply is a vague hand wave toward the edge of the village. That's not promising. You shuffle in that direction, stomach already protesting the gruel, and find what is politely referred to as a cesspit. Less politely, it's a hole. A very public, very pungent hole. There's a plank. It wobbles. The smell hits you like a trebuchet. You approach cautiously. There are no stalls, no privacy, no sinks. Just open air, communal judgment, and a family of geese who clearly consider this their domain. One of them hisses, "You back away." In medieval Europe, the concept of indoor plumbing was limited mostly to castles and monasteries, and even then, luxury meant a chute in the wall that emptied into a moat. For peasants, it's the woods, a ditch, or, if you're fancy, a shared bucket that gets emptied once a day. Maybe. You circle back to the cottage and ask about alternatives. A kindly old man hands you a spade. This is not a good sign. You take the spade, wander behind a haystack, and try to preserve some dignity. The experience is humbling. There's no paper, of course. Your options include moss, straw, or a smooth riverstone, which you now understand was both a practical tool and a terrible surprise. You opt for the moss. It goes about as well as expected. When you return, slightly traumatized, no one bats an eye. Apparently, you've just had the standard peasant cleanse. One child offers you a leaf. You don't ask why. Public sanitation is more of a vibe than a science. People dump waste, human and otherwise, into the streets or rivers. Chamber pots are emptied with a casual flick out the window. In cities, laws are passed requiring people to shout warnings like "Gardy Lou" before dumping contents. Historians still argue whether this was widely practiced or just an urban legend repeated to tourists. Either way, you're looking up nervously every time you pass under a window. Water sources are iffy. Wells are used but can easily be contaminated. Rivers double as bathtubs, dishwashing stations, and refuse highways. Boiling water helps, but fuel is expensive, so you drink beer and pray. In wealthier towns, you might find public bathhouses. These are mixed-gender, steamy affairs, popular for both hygiene and social mingling. The church eventually frowns upon these for reasons we won't explore right now, but for the average villager, they're a rare indulgence. You, however, are not in a wealthy town. You're still peeling straw from places straw should never be. You notice people carrying little pomanders, balls filled with herbs and spices, tied around their necks or belts. These are not just for flair. They're olfactory armor against the stench. You make a mental note to fashion your own. Maybe fill it with hope. As you continue walking, you spot a trench lining the road with a slow-moving sludge oozing through it. That's the drain. It's open air and frequently blocked by debris or livestock. A pig snuffles past you and dives right in. You reconsider lunch. There's a small group gathered near a wagon. Someone's selling soap made from ashes and lard. It's gritty and smells like smoked ham, but it's prized. You try to buy some, but the seller eyes your foreign tunic and triples the price. You walk away empty-handed and slightly more odorous, and yet somehow everyone seems okay with it. Not because they love filth, but because it's normal. The medieval nose has adapted, yours has not. You overhear a man bragging that he only bathes twice a year, whether he needs it or not. You are both impressed and deeply disturbed. At one point, a rat scurries past with something shiny in its mouth. You'd chase it, but your sandal strap broke near the cesspit, and frankly, you've had enough today. Still, you're adapting. Slowly. Painfully. You're learning to move through this world of dirt and dung with a little more grace. You even remember to carry the spade, just in case. It's time to get dressed properly, assuming you can find something that isn't damp, itchy, or suspiciously alive. You dig through the chest at the end of your shared straw mat and pull out what might be your outfit for the day. A shapeless tunic that smells faintly of wet sheep, a woolen hose with a hole in an unfortunate spot, and a belt that looks like it's been chewed by at least one animal. You sigh. You miss hoodies. Fashion in the Middle Ages isn't about expression, it's about survival and occasionally status. The average peasant owns two outfits, one to wear and one to patch. Both are made from coarse homespun fabric, likely wool, and dyed with whatever plants grow nearby. Popular hues include mud brown, faded mud brown, and gray if you squint. You pull the tunic over your head and instantly regret it. It's heavy, scratchy, warm in all the wrong ways. The hose are uneven, and you're reasonably sure one leg is inside out, but fixing it would take more energy than you have. Your belt is mostly decorative since your pants don't exist. That's right. No underpants as you know them. Just a long shirt and a prayer. A neighbor wanders by in what might be described as his Sunday best, though it's just a less patched version of the same tunic. He's wearing shoes made from rawhide wrapped around the foot and tied with cord. You glance down at your clogs. They've got a splinter. Of course they do. Smelling nice is not part of the plan. Perfume exists, but only for the wealthy, and usually to mask other smells. Most people carry around their own personal scent, developed from a lifelong commitment to minimal bathing, sleeping in the same clothes, and being very close to livestock. You've started to smell like history. To blend in, you try smearing some lavender under your arms. It's not much, but it beats your previous experiment with boiled nettles. You also attempt to tidy your hair, which has turned into a medieval sculpture. The comb you borrow is wooden, full of splinters, and possibly haunted. Fashion accessories? A little knife on your belt, a cloth pouch for coins or herbs, and maybe a hat if you're feeling fancy. Hats are critical, not just for style, but to keep lice in or out, depending on your perspective. The popular styles range from woolen sack tied with twine to cone-shaped felt disaster. You pick one that doesn't itch and try to wear it confidently. Historians still argue whether peasants were completely fashion blind or if they cared deeply about clothing within their means. Evidence from wills and inventories shows that even modest villagers had preferred tunics and best shoes for special occasions. So yes, that hole in your hose does matter. A woman passes wearing a linen coif under her hood, a sort of medieval bonnet that keeps hair clean and, in theory, lice-free. She gives you a look. You're not sure if it's admiration or alarm, but you nod politely and nearly trip over a bucket of turnip peels. Children wear miniature versions of adult clothes, usually hand-me-downs that don't quite fit. One kid is proudly wearing a tunic 3 sizes too big, dragging the hem like a royal train. He trips every few steps but seems thrilled. Fashion, it seems, is about attitude. You see someone with embroidery on their sleeves, just a little. That's a status flex. The richer you are, the finer the fabric, the brighter the color, the more detailed the trim. Blue is rare, purple is outrageous. Your color? Wash dust. And you wear it well. There's no laundry day per se. Clothes are washed irregularly, often by hand in icy streams, using ash soap and a beating rock. You attempt to scrub a stain and succeed only in soaking your sleeve. The fabric shrinks and now your arm feels like it's inside a woolen burrito. You finally step back, fully dressed, looking medieval. You're hot, itchy, slightly damp, and very much of the era. You no longer care what you look like, just that your shoes stay on and your belt doesn't unravel. Fashion in the Middle Ages may not be flattering, but it's honest. You wear your status, your labor, and your history on your back. Literally. And now you're ready to face the day. Frumpy, funky, and fabulously feudal. You step outside, proudly clad in your shapeless tunic and splintered clogs, ready to take on your next medieval challenge. Commuting. Your commute, however, isn't a quiet podcast stroll through a tree-lined avenue. Number. It's a slow, slippery trudge through a narrow, filth-coated alley where pigs roam freely and mud has ambitions. A rooster glares at you like he owns the place. He does. The street is a shared surface. Foot traffic, livestock, push carts, and the occasional runaway goose. People dart past with bundles of firewood, shouting greetings or insults, sometimes both. Children play dangerously close to open gutters. A dog is enthusiastically rolling in something that was once food. You pull your hood lower and try not to breathe through your nose. Streets in medieval towns aren't paved unless you're in a particularly wealthy area. Most paths are dirt, churned to slop during rains and baked to cracked misery in summer. Drainage is a suggestion at best. The muck you're walking through? A spicy mix of mud, animal droppings, food waste, and whatever the local tanneries dumped last night. The smell is immersive. There are no sidewalks, no street signs. You follow the flow of people, hoping you end up where work happens. Along the way, you pass various shop fronts. Blacksmiths hammering at hot iron, bakers pulling misshapen loaves from wood-fired ovens, weavers hunched over looms that squeak with every pull. The air is thick with smoke, yeast, and body odor. You're beginning to appreciate your lack of a sense of smell. You reach a main road and almost get flattened by an ox cart. The driver doesn't stop but does shout something rude about your clogs. You nod respectfully, he's not wrong. The working day starts early. Most folks rise with the sun and collapse with it, structured more by light than by hours. A church bell rings to mark the morning's official beginning, and everyone picks up their pace. You too hustle forward. Past the fishmonger yelling about yesterday's catch, past the guy who sells onions from a cart with one wheel, past the monk trying to preach over a flock of sheep. Historians still argue whether medieval towns were truly as noisy as modern cities, but from your current position, wedged between a goat and a man reciting prayers over a bucket, you're firmly in the yes camp. You slip. Not badly. Just enough to remind you that your balance isn't what it used to be, and that mud can hide all kinds of unspeakable secrets. A nearby washerwoman cackles. You nod again. You're learning. There's no real traffic law. People go where they want, when they want, unless they're stopped by a horse, a guard, or a heavily armed nun. Yes, that's a thing. More on that later. Merchants hawk goods, and you overhear a loud debate about whether a certain sausage contains real meat. You decide not to investigate. Eventually, you pass a communal fountain. It's one of the few sources of freshish water, supplied by a lead pipe that has historians still debating how aware people were of lead poisoning. It's a gathering place. Mothers washing clothes, children filling buckets, elders grumbling about rain or the lack thereof. A man nearby is trying to sell relics. He swears he has a saint's toenail. You politely decline. Some towns have cobblestone streets, especially near the church or the Lord's manor, but even these are treacherous. You see a man trip, roll down a short hill, and land in a cabbage cart. No one helps him up. The cabbages are fine. You realize quickly that mobility is a privilege. If you're wealthy, you ride a horse. If you're holy, maybe a donkey. If you're poor, you walk everywhere. And if you're injured, you beg. You pass one man with a wooden crutch fashioned from a chair leg. He's cheerful somehow, humming a tune about fish. You finally arrive at what you think is your work site, only to be told you're late, even though you've been walking for an hour and it's not even second bell. You offer to help carry something. The foreman hands you a bucket and points to a pile of dung. It's unclear whether this is your job or just hazing. You carry the bucket. As you shuffle into place beside your fellow workers, who all smell like smoke and onions, you realize something important. Medieval commuting isn't just about distance. It's about surviving the gauntlet of odors, obstacles, and unpredictable poultry. You're not good at it yet, but you're improving. So here you are, holding a bucket of dung and wondering if this is rock bottom or just the daily grind. You've officially started your medieval job. Spoiler, it's not fulfilling. Your task, as assigned by a man with 4 teeth and infinite authority, is to move piles of compost from one side of the yard to the other. Why? Unclear. Possibly as punishment? Possibly just tradition. Your fellow workers don't question it. They just shovel and sweat. Jobs in the Middle Ages are often brutally physical. There's no concept of ergonomics or back support. Tools are rudimentary. Safety regulations consist of try not to die. Your pitchfork has a splintered handle, your gloves are just wishful thinking, and there's a chicken aggressively supervising your every move. If you're not a laborer, maybe you're apprenticing, tied to a master in hopes of one day earning a trade. You could be a tanner, a weaver, a cooper, a thatcher, a fletcher. Each job comes with its own blend of smells, injuries, and deeply specific expertise, and most of them involve sharp objects or boiling something. Historians still argue whether medieval workers had more free time than modern ones. Sure, some peasants had religious holidays and long winter breaks, but when you worked, you really worked. Sun up to sundown, 6 days a week, with meals that were basically bread with hope. You try to ask your new boss if you can take a quick break. He laughs so hard he wheezes. Many jobs are seasonal. Farmers plow, plant, and harvest with the rhythm of nature. Carpenters build when the wood's dry. Shepherds, well, they shepherd. You apparently are a temporary dung relocation specialist. Congratulations. The worst jobs? Let's not sugarcoat it. Tanners work with urine. Gong farmers clean latrines. Executioners have job security, but very few dinner invites. You spot one man with suspicious stains on his boots and an aura of existential detachment. You don't make eye contact. You're briefly offered a chance to help the smithy. You last 5 minutes. The heat is unbearable, the air is thick with soot, and the hammering is so loud your teeth itch. You retreat back to your dung pile. Somehow, it feels safer. Lunch comes with a little fanfare. A chunk of bread, a wedge of questionable cheese, and some dried fruit that might have been a plum 2 seasons ago. You chew in silence with your fellow workers, who mostly ignore you unless you're in their way. Work continues with few breaks. There are no unions, no lunchrooms, no HR departments. If you injure yourself, you might be patched up by the local wise woman, who uses moss and murmured Latin. If you're lucky, she has honey. If not, it's a prayer and a poultice. You hear about a woman who earns coin brewing ale in her back room. It's a respectable trade, until the ale turns sour or the taxes go unpaid. Then she's suddenly a witch. You make a mental note not to annoy the alewives. Apprenticeship is the only path out of this grind, but it takes years and often requires a family connection or money. You have neither. Still, you admire the blacksmith's apprentice, a wiry teen who moves like he's part of the forge itself. His hands are black with soot, but his face glows with pride. He's probably 17. He also probably has arthritis. By mid-afternoon, you're covered in sweat, blisters, and something you hope is just mud. You try to sit for a moment and are instantly scolded. The older workers joke about young blood needing naps. One offers you a turnip. You don't know if it's a joke. The sun finally begins to dip. There's no clock, no siren, just the shift in light, the toll of the distant bell, and the collective sigh of an entire village exhaling. You stretch your aching back and realize you've survived a full day's labor. Barely. No productivity apps, no lunch breaks, no ergonomics. Just raw work, 6 days a week, until your body gives out or your guild says you're good enough to do it on your own. Welcome to your job. It's awful, always. You sit down for a breather, and as luck would have it, you stub your toe on a rock. Hard. So hard, in fact, that you're fairly certain something is cracked. Pain shoots through your foot. You yelp, hopping in circles while your fellow villagers look on with mild amusement and zero offers of help. Time for some good old-fashioned medieval medicine. The village healer is a woman in her late 60s with a look that says she's seen everything and liked almost none of it. Her hut smells like herbs, smoke, and something faintly metallic. She gestures for you to sit, pulls off your sock, which was, incidentally, soaked through, and gives your toe a quick glance. Then she packs it in mashed onion and ties it with a strip of linen. You wait. That's it. There is no antiseptic, no x-ray, just onion, linen, and what may or may not have been a prayer muttered under her breath. You ask if you should rest. She replies that the devil finds work for idle feet. Medicine in the Middle Ages is a charming mix of ancient texts, folk wisdom, astrological charts, and whatever's growing out back. Some of it works, a lot of it doesn't, and some of it definitely causes new problems. Case in point, you're offered a potion for the swelling. It's a mix of honey, vinegar, sage, and something that might be lizard tail. It tastes like a mistake. You drink it anyway. Desperation is a powerful seasoning. If things were worse, say you'd broken a leg or had a fever, the options would widen dramatically. Bloodletting, leech therapy, or maybe even tree panning, which is where they drill a hole in your skull to release the pressure. Historians still argue whether that ever helped anyone, or if it was just a medieval version of hitting reboot. You see a man nearby with a bandaged arm and ask what happened. Bad humors, he says solemnly. The belief in bodily humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, rules all. Your stubbed toe? Clearly an imbalance. Perhaps too much heat. Or not enough cold. Maybe Saturn's in a weird position. You stop asking. One local swears by garlic salves. Another swears at garlic salves. A third says the only real cure is a pilgrimage to a distant monastery where a monk keeps the toe bone of St. Crispin. You laugh. He does not. Surgeries happen, but not in any way you'd recognize. No anesthesia, no sterile tools, no quiet rooms. Just a knife, a leather strap to bite, and someone strong to hold you still. You thank your lucky stars you're not bleeding. Yet. You limp through the village, hoping the onion poultice holds. Someone recommends a visit to the barber surgeon for real treatment. You remember him from before. Red apron, haunted eyes, and decide to walk it off instead. Herbalism is big here. The healer's shelves are lined with dried plants. Yarrow, comfrey, willow bark. Some of these actually do have medicinal properties. Willow bark, for example, contains salicin, a precursor to aspirin. But your toe gets a different treatment, a smudge of goose fat and a whispered chant. You nod gratefully and try not to limp too obviously. Meanwhile, the villagers trust in saints. For headaches, Saint Denis. For plague, Saint Sebastian. For general mystery ailments, a candle lit in the right chapel and a coin left in the box. You've got neither a candle nor a coin, but you say a quick thank you to Saint Toe, just in case. As you shuffle back to your dwelling, you pass a funeral procession. A handful of mourners, a wooden cart, and a wrapped body. People nod respectfully, but don't pause. Death is a part of life here, so much so that it rarely surprises anyone. Fevers, infections, childbirth, any one of them could be your last act. But it's not all grim. A child nearby is laughing as he plays with a carved wooden goat. A woman sings while hanging herbs to dry. You, despite the pain and the onion, feel oddly alive. Still, you'd kill for some ibuprofen. After your onion-wrapped ordeal, you decide you need a distraction, something to lift your spirits. You ask around for entertainment and are promptly directed to the town square where a spectacle is underway. You arrive to find a growing crowd gathered near a raised wooden platform. There's laughter, shouting, the occasional tossed cabbage. You assume you've stumbled upon a theater performance. You have not. On the platform, a man is locked into the pillory, his head and hands trapped in wooden stocks. A sign above him says something about theft of ecclesiastical cheese. Apparently he stole from the monastery, or insulted someone's goat. It's unclear. Either way, it's showtime. In the Middle Ages, public punishment doubles as community entertainment. Executions, floggings, duckings, and scoldings all draw big crowds. They're part morality play, part social glue. Everyone gathers not just to gawk, but to reinforce what behavior is and isn't acceptable. It's oddly communal and very loud. You glance around and realize this is a normal day. Families have brought snacks. A woman is knitting, someone's roasting chestnuts. There's even a juggler trying to lighten the mood. The man in the stocks sneezes. A nearby boy offers him a rotten apple. Medieval comedy is not subtle. You spot a puppet show off to the side. Two hand-carved figures, one clearly meant to be the devil, the other a monk, are arguing over who gets to steal a chicken. The devil wins, only to be struck down by divine lightning, a hand puppet on a stick. The crowd cheers. You applaud awkwardly. It's strangely engaging. Historians still argue whether such performances were meant more for moral instruction or comic relief. But the effect is the same. People are enthralled. It's a break from the relentless grind of labor and mud and onions. Later, you catch wind of a troubadour setting up in a tavern. You limp over, wedge yourself onto a bench, and order something that's described as ale adjacent. It's thick, warm, and possibly sentient. The troubadour begins to sing. Ballads about knights, saints, forbidden lovers, and giant talking birds. He plucks a lute with practiced flair and even throws in a joke about a monk, a duck, and a barrel of eels. The tavern erupts. This finally feels like entertainment. You learn that other sources of amusement include mystery plays, religious stories acted out with lots of smoke and questionable Latin, animal fights, less charming, and festivals which combine all the above with fire and bad decisions. Dancing is popular, though mostly in the form of line dances and circle stomps. You try to join in and are promptly corrected by a child half your size. Sometimes people gather to tell stories. Around the fire in the square by the mill. Legends of dragons, saints, and heroes who once beat back Viking raiders with nothing but a spoon. Is it true? Doesn't matter. It passes the time and keeps the cold away. Games exist, too, though they're simple. Dice, chess, knucklebones, and a weird form of football that involves half the village, 2 pigs, and absolutely no rules. You are invited to join. You decline on behalf of your still aching toe. One man pulls out a recorder-like flute and begins to play a tune so haunting and off-key that it feels like a challenge to your eardrums. Everyone claps anyway. You do too. It seems polite. Entertainment here isn't polished, but it's present. It's creative, communal, and surprisingly lively. You begin to understand how people made it through centuries without Netflix. They had each other, stories, songs, and enough odd punishments to keep things interesting. Still, you miss headphones. After the excitement and mild moral confusion of public punishment and puppet-based theology, your thoughts drift towards something lighter. Romance, perhaps. Love? Companionship? Surely the Middle Ages had room for tender moments between 2 plague-surviving souls? You decide to flirt. Bad idea. You approach a young woman at the well, armed with a smile and your best Middle English approximation of hello. She stares at you like you've just declared war on her goat. Then she throws a bucket of water over your feet and walks away. Romance in the Middle Ages is a deeply structured affair. Courtship is a ritual, not a vibe. Most marriages are arranged, negotiated like property transfers, and based more on cows and land than on butterflies in the stomach. Love might come later. Or not. You're beginning to suspect that your modern ideas of dating are dangerously out of place here. Among peasants, marriage is practical. You marry young, often in your early teens, and mostly to secure alliances, share labor, or merge livestock collections. For the wealthy, it's a chess game of dowries, family names, and inheritance. Historians still argue whether love matches were rare exceptions or more common than the official records suggest. Either way, Tinder wouldn't stand a chance. You overhear a man at the tavern boasting that his wife brought 2 goats and a decent sickle into the marriage. Everyone nods approvingly. Someone offers a toast. You nurse your warm ale quietly. Sex is regulated more by the church than by personal inclination. There are rules. Oh, so many rules. Which days are holy, and therefore off-limits. What positions are appropriate. Whether you're allowed to be joyful or must pretend to be filing tax returns mid-embrace. Flirting is risky business. Touch the wrong hand, and you're accused of impropriety. Glance too long, and someone's grandmother is yelling about fornication and summoning the local priest. Still, love does exist. You hear stories. A traveling minstrel recites a ballad about a knight who wrote poems to a noblewoman for 12 years before ever speaking to her. He then died in battle. She became a nun. Everyone claps. You're not encouraged. Among villagers, affection is quieter. A shared apple, a carved wooden charm, an offer to share firewood. These are grand gestures in a world where survival trumps sentiment. You do see one young couple holding hands near the bakery, stealing glances over sourdough. It's oddly sweet. You try again, this time offering a flower, okay, a weed, to a young man tending sheep. He squints at you, says something about goat curses, and slowly backs away. Courtship customs vary widely by region. In some towns, lovers toss pebbles at windows. In others, they sing at dawn under balconies. And in at least one case you overhear, a man tried to impress a girl by wrestling a goose. It did not go well. Jealousy is real, and so are consequences. A woman caught kissing someone else's betrothed might be dragged through the street. A man caught in adultery could be publicly flogged or fined in chickens. Love is not just personal, it's civic. You briefly contemplate joining a monastery. No dating, sure, but also no awkward encounters, no angry goats, and plenty of bread. You make a mental note to inquire. Back at the tavern, someone is reciting verses from The Romance of the Rose, a wildly popular and wildly confusing poem about love, virtue, and garden metaphors. You catch phrases like thorns of lust and flowers of chastity, and decide you prefer simpler metaphors like bread. A woman near the fire is spinning flax while humming. You nod. She nods. It's peaceful. No expectations. Just wool and warmth. You might not find love here, but you're beginning to understand it. It's nightfall now, and your aching body craves rest. You limp back toward your shared dwelling, past the flickering oil lamps and the last crackling embers of cook fires. The village winds down as the sun dips below the thatched rooftops. The smell's mellow, from smoke and sweat to something closer to damp wool and cooling soup. You open the creaky door and find your bed waiting for you. A lumpy sack stuffed with straw, shared by at least 2 other people and one perpetually offended cat. Medieval sleeping arrangements are intimate. Personal space is a modern luxury you will not be enjoying. You wedge yourself into a corner of the mattress and pull the blanket. A rough, woolen sheet that feels like sleeping under a hairy door, up to your chin. You try not to make eye contact with the person next to you, who is already snoring like they've swallowed a bagpipe. The cat jumps on your chest and kneads aggressively. There's no central heating, of course. Your only warmth comes from shared body heat and the slight radiance of the hearth's dying fire. You're thankful for the smell of baked earth and soot. It masks the more questionable aromas of unwashed feet and fermented linen. If you were lucky enough to be upper class, you might have your own bed, even a feather mattress and a canopy to keep the cold and the bugs out. Maybe servants to stoke the fire through the night, or a thick fur throw made from something with teeth. But you're not upper class. You're just trying not to roll into the person next to you. Sleep hygiene? Let's just say the fleas are winning. You try not to scratch too much. Someone murmurs in their sleep. You whisper a quiet, "It's fine. Everything's fine," to yourself. Before sleep, you hear stories, sometimes prayers, sometimes gossip, sometimes unsettling dreams about roosters with human faces. People share everything here, including nightmares. One elderly woman mutters about the cursed blue cow again. No one questions it. This is just bedtime now. The room darkens fully. There's no electricity, of course, only moonlight through the shutters. You hear the wind creak in the eaves, the rhythmic drip of a leaky bucket, and someone quietly munching stale bread under the covers. Historians still argue whether most medieval people slept through the night in one long stretch or in 2 distinct phases. First sleep and second sleep, broken by a few hours of wakefulness. Some use that time to pray, tell stories, or sneak off for a little candlelit mischief. You, however, will not be doing any of that. You are exhausted, bone-deep, soul-weary, medievally tired. You doze off briefly, only to be woken by a rooster crowing at what must be 2 a.m. You whisper unspeakable things into your straw pillow. A nearby donkey brays in sympathy. You manage to fall back asleep only to be poked in the ribs by a foot. Then again, by a small hand. You open one eye and realize the toddler who sleeps at the end of the bed has migrated up like a wriggling heat-seeking missile. She's drooling on your sleeve. You let her. You dream of memory foam. Outside, dogs bark at nothing. A bell tolls in the distance. Probably someone died, or someone was born, or a goat has reached enlightenment. You no longer care. You shift. The straw rustles. Something that might be a beetle scurries across your ankle. You sigh. Eventually, your body gives in and drags you into true sleep. It's not peaceful, but it's sleep. And in the Middle Ages, that counts as luxury. Morning breaks far too soon. You wake to the unmistakable sound of someone loudly stirring porridge and someone else loudly stirring themselves. The fire's already been rekindled, casting dancing shadows on the rough stone wall. You blink, groggy, and take stock. You're sore, still itchy, and your toe still smells faintly of onion. But you're awake. And it's Sunday, which means church. Religion isn't just part of life in the Middle Ages, it is life. It explains weather, illness, crop failure, and that mysterious rash on your neighbor's elbow. Everything you do, eating, sleeping, sneezing, is laced with rituals, blessings, and a firm belief that unseen forces are keeping score. So you dress in your best tunic, which is only slightly less holy than your weekday one, and follow the stream of villagers to the local church. It's a squat, cold stone building, possibly built in the last century, possibly by magic. The stained glass windows are simple but beautiful, casting colored shapes across the uneven floor. You step inside. It's freezing. There's no heating except for the heat of faith, and several hundred human bodies crammed shoulder to shoulder. The air smells of wax, damp wool, and hope. The priest begins Mass in Latin. You don't understand a word. No one really does, except the priest and maybe the local scribe. The rest just know when to kneel, when to stand, and when to avoid eye contact, because your stomach is growling again. The church service is long, hours even. You try to stay awake, mostly out of fear that falling asleep in God's house will invite divine flatulence or worse. Around you, children fidget. Elders hum tunelessly. One man near the front appears to be asleep with his eyes open. Impressive. Historians still debate whether the average peasant found spiritual meaning in these services or simply endured them as part of the routine. You suspect it's a little of both. For some, the church is comfort. For others, obligation. For everyone, it's mandatory. The priest delivers a sermon that involves a parable about pigs and temptation. You catch one phrase in the local dialect, something about the devil's onions. Your toe twinges in recognition. You shift in your seat and try not to look guilty. After service, the courtyard bustles. People gossip, barter, and arrange future marriages. The church isn't just a spiritual center, it's also the social hub, the notice board, the courthouse, and sometimes even the concert hall. You linger near a group discussing the arrival of a traveling friar who reportedly carries a finger bone of St. Mildred. You nod solemnly. You have no idea who that is. Back inside, you notice that the church's wall paintings depict vivid scenes. Saints being martyred, demons being trampled, and one unsettling image of a bishop jousting a snake. Religious art here isn't subtle. It's loud, colorful, and very pointy. Every image screams, "Be good or else." You're told that wealthy villagers pay to have masses said for their souls. Some even purchase indulgences. Little spiritual, get-out-of-jail-free cards for sins real and imagined. You, meanwhile, have just enough coin for half a boiled egg and a questionable apple. Eternal salvation will have to wait. Confession is also popular. You're invited to try it. You step into the wooden booth, sit awkwardly, and murmur your regrets, mostly involving gruel-related cursing and one regrettable comment about a goose. The priest nods, prescribes several Hail Marys, and gently suggests you stop flirting with people at the well. You thank him. You feel mildly absolved. Religion seeps into every corner of the day. Meals are blessed. Illnesses are blamed on sin. Even sleep is bracketed by whispered prayers. One man proudly shows off his homemade cross carved from elderwood. Another wears a tiny reliquary around his neck, containing allegedly a shred of St. Agnes's cloak. You suspect it's just a piece of old sackcloth, but you smile anyway. You leave church feeling medieval, properly cleansed, spiritually scolded, and vaguely more respectful of pigs. The path home is quiet. Birds chirp. A child sings a hymn off-key. Somewhere, a bell rings for midday prayer. You pause, fold your hands, and whisper something that might count. After all, you need all the help you can get. It's a new week, and for reasons still unclear to you, you've decided to take a journey. Maybe you're chasing opportunity. Maybe you're just trying to escape the suspicious bread incident from last night. Either way, you're about to learn something vital. Travel in the Middle Ages is not relaxing. You begin by walking because, well, you don't own a horse, or a cart, or a sturdy pair of boots. Most people travel on foot, averaging maybe 12 to 15 miles a day if they're lucky and not constantly distracted by blisters, bandits, or confused sheep. The road is barely a road. It's more of a trail, worn down by feet and hooves, winding through open fields, shadowy woods, and the occasional bog that appears out of nowhere and eats your shoe. You pass a man pulling a goat on a rope. You nod. He nods. The goat does not. There are no signposts, no GPS. If you're lucky, you'll find a milestone left over from the Roman days. Otherwise, you ask locals, follow rivers, or trust in the stars, if you know how to read them. You do not. You get lost within the first hour. You come across a small stone bridge guarded by a man with a large stick and a questionable beard. He demands a toll. You offer a piece of cheese and an apology. He lets you pass, possibly out of pity. Travel is dangerous. Bandits roam the forests. Wolves too, depending on the season. Even the occasional wild boar if you're especially unlucky. You carry a stick for defense and rehearse your "I'm poor and not worth robbing" speech just in case. Historians still argue whether medieval travel was truly as perilous as chroniclers claimed, or if some tales were exaggerated for dramatic flair. All you know is the woods are too quiet, your stick is too short, and that tree over there definitely just moved. At night, you sleep in a roadside shelters if you find one, or under a tree, or in a ditch if the tree is already occupied. Inns exist, but they're rare, pricey, and smell like a combination of ale, sweat, and broken dreams. You stumble upon one late in the evening. It has a swinging sign, a stable, and the distinct sound of someone being thrown out. You step in. The innkeeper eyes you, assesses your coin pouch, light, your boots, worse, and your hat, tragic. He charges you half a loaf and a story. You pay both. The room is shared with 3 merchants and a man who might be a bard, might be asleep, or might be deceased, no one's sure. You curl up in the corner with your sack as a pillow and dream of wheels. On the road the next morning, you pass a traveling monk with calloused feet and a calm smile. He tells you he's been walking for weeks on pilgrimage to Canterbury. You ask if it's worth it. He says, "The blisters are temporary." The stories last longer. You nod. He offers you a fig. It is both dry and glorious. You reach a river and must wait for a ferry, a glorified rowboat piloted by a man with more teeth than sense. He charges a button and a blessing. You pay both. The blessing may have been a sneeze. Sometimes you meet traveling entertainers, minstrels, jugglers, or a man with an exceptionally well-trained chicken. They trade tales for bread, and the chicken does tricks. You applaud. The chicken bows. You cross fields of grain, crumbling shrines, and a pile of stones that someone swears is very cursed. You do not touch it. Eventually, you reach your destination. Another village, barely different, just dustier and slightly less hostile to your accent. The journey took 2 days. You are bruised, exhausted, and smell like goat. But you made it. You realize then, medieval travel isn't about comfort. It's about patience, grit, and occasionally bribing a goat. And next time, maybe just stay home. It's your 3rd day in this new village, and just as you're beginning to think things might be calming down, you sneeze. Loudly, spectacularly, twice. Everyone nearby stops what they're doing. An old woman crosses herself. A baker subtly steps back. A child points and says, "It's starting." You assure everyone it's just a sneeze, maybe from all the hay. You smile. No one smiles back. In the Middle Ages, sneezing is not taken lightly. Illness isn't merely a medical matter, it's spiritual, social, and deeply suspicious. And you, dear traveler, are suddenly very interesting. You feel fine, mostly. Just a tickle in your throat. Maybe a chill. But your host insists you drink a concoction made of boiled sage, vinegar, and something that might be beetle. You do. You regret it. Medieval understanding of illness is a charming blend of Greek theory, religious fervor, and "it worked for my uncle once." The dominant belief centers around the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Your sneeze? Clearly an excess of phlegm. Or maybe an imbalance brought on by lunar misalignment. Or perhaps that goat you insulted on the ferry. A neighbor recommends you rebalance by bleeding. Another suggests leeches. A third insists you eat nothing but onions for 3 days. You begin to fear onions on a molecular level. You're told to avoid miasma, bad air that causes sickness. You're given a posy of herbs to sniff and advised to walk with your mouth covered. You fashion a mask out of wool and look like a nervous bandit. Someone offers you a pigeon feather to wave the air away. You accept cautiously. Historians still debate whether medieval doctors helped or hurt more often. Some treatments, like herbal remedies, had merit. Others, like hanging a frog around your neck to cure a cough, were less effective. You try neither frog nor feather. You just sit down and try to will yourself into wellness. Unfortunately, someone has seen you sneeze again. The town gossip mill kicks into overdrive. Within an hour, you are rumored to have the sweating sickness, St. Anthony's fire, and the mark of the cloud serpent, whatever that is. A priest eyes you warily. A healer throws salt behind your back. You try to explain allergies. No one understands. You begin to self-isolate, mostly out of fear that you'll be forcibly isolated anyway. In some towns, illness means quarantine, either in your home, outside the walls, or in a pest house, a structure that is exactly as charming as it sounds. If things escalate, the village might even burn your bedding. Or you, just in case. You don't have the plague. At least you don't think you do. But even the mildest cold here can be a disaster. Without antibiotics or vaccines, infections can spiral fast. What starts as a sniffle can end with a candlelit prayer and a hasty burial. People die from cuts, fevers, childbirth, and even bad broth. You watch a sick child be carried into the church for healing prayers. The priest anoints his head with oil. The villagers chant. You murmur along just in case. By the next morning, you feel better. Genuinely. No fever, no cough. Just a lingering fear of garlic-based teas. But the damage is done. People still avoid you. A chicken refuses to make eye contact. You consider pretending to be a holy fool, someone blessed with divine madness, allowed to sneeze at will, but decide against it. Your foot still hurts and you don't want to push your luck. You find solace in the healer's hut. She doesn't flinch when you sniffle. She hands you a warm drink and a small carved charm. For balance, she says. You thank her. You don't believe in charms, but you keep it anyway. Illness here is about more than health. It's about community fear, religious interpretation, and your standing among people who are just trying to survive. Your one sneeze rippled through the village like thunder. But you're still standing, still breathing, still slightly onion-scented. And you're learning. In the Middle Ages, even a cough can be a catastrophe. You've recovered. Mostly. You still flinch every time you feel a tickle in your nose, but the worst seems behind you. Unfortunately, your spirits take another blow as you remember a task you've been putting off. Visiting the town hall. You have a question. Just a simple one. About land use or tax, or maybe the rules about selling turnips that smell like regret. But nothing is simple in medieval bureaucracy. You approach the town hall, a squat building that leans slightly to the left like it's tired of its own paperwork. A bored-looking clerk sits at a high desk behind a wooden screen, scribbling something that may or may not be words. You politely state your purpose. He frowns. You'll need a writ. You ask what a writ is. He frowns harder. Permission to ask for permission. He waves vaguely at a hallway. You shuffle down it. In the next room, another clerk asks who sent you. You say, the other guy. He sighs and hands you a form. It's in Latin. You stare at it blankly. You write your name. Possibly upside down. Paper is precious. Ink more so. Mistakes are frowned upon, sometimes literally punished. You try to fix a blot with your sleeve. The clerk gasps like you've insulted his mother. You're sent back to the first room. A new man is there. He asks for your name, your lineage, your purpose, and your goat tax. You have no goat. He writes something dramatic and sends you to the reeve. The reeve is busy. You sit and wait. And listen to a scribe read a 23-minute proclamation about grain storage, all while two pigeons argue loudly in the rafters. Somewhere behind a door, someone sneezes. You brace for panic, but no one reacts. Apparently, that guy's immune to suspicion. Finally, the reeve appears. He's important. He wears a fancy hat. He smells like expensive cheese and disappointment. You explain your question. He nods, thoughtfully strokes his beard, and says you'll need to speak to the bailiff. You nearly scream. Historians still debate whether medieval bureaucracy was intentionally opaque or just the result of having too many scrolls and not enough shelving. Either way, you now understand why people joined monasteries. At least they had filing systems. You finally find the bailiff. He's asleep. You gently wake him. He groans, points at a stack of scrolls, and tells you to find your name. You search. There are dozens. Some are crumbling. One has a mouse hole. You find your name, or at least something close. It's spelled Yon Dung, and includes a fine for stepping on church moss. You do not recall this. You ask again about your original question. The bailiff scratches his head, sniffs, and says, "That's a guild matter." You don't know what that means. He's already walked away. 3 hours later, you emerge into the sunlight, blinking, dazed, and deeply unhelped. You have no answer. You have new questions. You also might now be married to a tax. You drag yourself to the tavern. The ale tastes worse than usual. You sip slowly and listen to two men arguing about how long it takes to get a response from the local lord. One says 3 weeks, the other says never. You nod solemnly. Paperwork is stored in great dusty trunks or on shelves with no order. The idea of filing by category has yet to be invented. It's more filing by hope. Wax seals abound, but no one seems to know whose seal does what. You consider starting your own seal. A drawing of a confused chicken, maybe. Your head throbs. Your toe aches. Your patience is gone. And still, somehow, the system works. Slowly, haphazardly, but it works. Disputes get resolved. Sort of. Land gets divided. Sometimes fines get paid. Always. You make peace with never knowing the answer to your original question. Maybe it wasn't that important. Maybe nothing is. Maybe the real bureaucracy was the friends you made along the way. As the sun sets and the bell tolls for evening prayer, you smile weakly. You survived another ordeal. One full of paper, stamps, hats, and utter confusion. You'll take pillory theater over this any day. The sky outside dims gently, washed in lavender hues as the village settles into sleep once more. Smoke curls upward from chimney tops. The echo of distant hooves fades into the hush. Within the quiet of your straw-filled room, the rhythm of your breath slows, syncing with the sleepy creak of timber and the soft tick of wind through thatch. You lie back, hands over your chest, soothed by the memory of simpler moments. The puppet play, the quiet nod of a stranger, the warmth of shared soup on a chill day. Life here is rough, often absurd, sometimes itchy, but also grounded. Steady, human. Even the rooster who once seemed bent on your destruction sounds softer now. You exhale. Beyond the shuttered windows, stars begin to prickle the velvet night. Somewhere a dog huffs in its sleep. A lullaby drifts from a house nearby, notes thin and warm as candlelight. And you, wrapped in coarse wool and centuries of dust, feel the last of the day slip away. Everything slows, everything fades. You are here. And now you rest. End of script. Sweet dreams.